I prepared this sermon as I was sitting in my office here at the church. My office is sometimes a challenging place to get any writing done because it can be noisy. There are usually conversations going on in the main office, telephone interruptions, people coming and going, and right outside my window, the children from the Child Development Center shrieking and laughing and shouting as they play on the playground. But not anymore. These days, the offices and the playground are empty, and it is as quiet as a tomb here. And now, here I am in the sanctuary, and it's Easter, when there would normally be a crowd of people with the rustling of bulletins, the crying of a baby or two, and from balcony church, the noise of children clomping around and dropping pencils on the wooden floor and whispering to one another. But not today. Today, I'm preaching in an empty sanctuary. It feels so strange and wrong. And yet, this may be a whole lot more like that first Easter. As we begin the passage in John, it's very early in the morning, and Mary Magdalene is all by herself in an empty cemetery. The sun isn't up yet, so she doesn't see until she's right at the opening of the tomb that the stone is gone. She has no one to turn to for help there. So she races back to tell Simon Peter and the other unnamed disciple that Jesus' body has been stolen. And then the three of them run back with her to the tomb, look around, and see the grave clothes lying there. In seeing this, we're told, the unnamed disciple believes. But what he believes is what Mary Magdalene reported, that Jesus' body had been taken away, not that he was raised. So the two men quickly get out of there and go back to where they had been hiding before. Mary, though, stays behind, alone once again. And so as the dust settles from that frantic activity and silence descends, she looks back into the tomb. And now she sees two angels. "Why are you weeping?" they ask. And Mary says again what she believes to be true. "They've taken away my Lord, and I don't know where they've laid him." And then she turns and sees Jesus. Only she doesn't really see him through her tears, because when he repeats the angel's question, "Why are you weeping?" and then adds, "For whom are you looking?" she thinks he's the gardener, until he quietly says her name, "Mary," and she turns and recognizes him. I wonder if he's been there all along, just standing there, trying to get through to her. I wonder if he's been calling her name the whole time, but it's only now quiet enough for her to hear. For all of us, this has suddenly become a much quieter time, though we're experiencing it in many different ways. I've heard from some of you that sheltering in place is exactly the break that you and your family needed from the demands of your overly scheduled lives. For others of you, though, the demands haven't gone away. They've multiplied as you've tried to do the same amount of work from home using unfamiliar technological platforms while also doing full-time parenting and homeschooling. For others, there has been no staying at home. Instead, you've had to drive through nearly empty streets to face the dangers of daily contact with patients or with customers, knowing that the virus could strike you any day, and you've had to make hard decisions in order to keep your family safe, sequestering yourself in a separate part of the house, or even sending your children away to relatives. And for those of you who live alone, this has been a time of near total isolation, unable to leave your home or even your room, and unable to have visitors. But no matter how this pandemic is affecting each of us, we are all suddenly living in a quieter world than before, as nearly our whole society has come to a standstill. Like the quiet in which Mary heard Jesus call her name and turned toward him. Now that wasn't a physical turning, by the way. She had already physically turned toward Jesus to look at him back when she thought he was the gardener. This was a psychological turning, a change in her understanding. What changed was suddenly knowing that the one she'd thought was dead was fully alive and calling to her. And with that knowledge, the impossible was suddenly possible again. A world transformed from hopelessness and death and division into one of life and love and belonging, not just for her, who had remained steadfast and faithful, but even for the disciples who had denied him and run away in fear. Don't cling to me, Jesus says, because he's not hers to own or control. Instead, as Frances Taylor Gensch points out, she is to go and tell the others that a new relationship with God is now available. My Father is now your Father. My God is now your God. And Jesus' Spirit now unites believers to him and to one another as brothers and sisters. What began in the crisis of death changed everything to a world of life. What about our own crisis of death? What changes might it bring about if we can hear Jesus call our names and turn toward him? Even now, we can see that unimaginable behavioral change is possible on the turn of a dime when we know that our lives are at stake. In just a few weeks of shutdown, the skies are clearing over China and India, New York and LA. Now that we know what's possible in the short term, what long-term changes can we make to save not just our own lives, but the lives of future generations of humans and of every kind of creature? Within a period of a few short weeks, a seemingly gridlocked Congress has passed a flurry of legislation to protect small businesses from ruin and laid off workers from devastation and eviction. Not enough, of course, but now that we know that such things are possible in the short term, perhaps we might raise our expectations for the long term so that the privileges of the few, like reliable health care and living wages and secure housing, can become the day-to-day reality for everyone. And in the seeming blink of an eye, social customs we'd thought had gone by the wayside, phone calls and cards, running errands for neighbors, have suddenly become the new normal again, as we've hungered to see faces and hear voices that we used to take for granted. This is a graveyard time. This is still a time of death, and the weeping isn't over yet. But when it begins to lift, will we go back to the same soul-crushing, dog-eat-dog, business as usual that we had before? Or has this time of sudden quiet helped us to heed another voice and turn in a different direction? That's my hope. Don't cling to me, Jesus said to Mary, and we shouldn't either. We shouldn't cling to hard and fast ideas of where he may lead us, because he is in the lead, not us. And his vision is so much bigger than ours. Instead, now that we've been given the chance in the sudden silence to hear him call our name, we must turn and go. Because there is a world of tears just waiting to hear the amazing news that he is not dead and they are not forgotten or abandoned, but that instead every good and joyful possibility is alive once more for them, for us, and for this whole world. Thanks be to God.